I firmly believe someone out there knows something. Someone out there saw something, heard something. We need that person to call us.
Has there been any evidence so far that Nancy is still alive, or is it just hope of investigators and the family?
There's been no evidence that she's not.
Investigators are now turning to genetic genealogy testing in the search for Nancy Guthrie. This is the same cutting-edge tool that has cracked other very high-profile cases. Plus, was Nancy Guthrie's disappearance a one-person job, or was it a team effort? We're breaking down the possibility of accomplices. And a Maui hike turned into a nightmare. A doctor accused of trying to push his wife off a cliff. The Trouble in Paradise trial is now just weeks away. Also, quote, how do you kill your dad? That's what the alleged Appalachia High School shooter apparently searched for before the mass shooting. Now his dad is on trial for allegedly missing the warning signs. So how is the state of Georgia doing so far? We'll talk about it. It's all coming up next for you right here on Opening Statements. Good Friday morning to you, my friends. TGIF. I'm Julie Grant, and this is Opening Statements, and we're so glad you're waking up with us this morning. We got a big show planned, so let's get it started as we always do. Grab that cup of coffee right now. It's time for my opening statement. The Black Swan committed a battery? That's what the Florida Department of Corrections says. They say that convicted killer Ashley Benefield committed a battery on a corrections officer, and that the incident has landed her locked up in disciplinary confinement within the prison. I can't say I'm surprised that the bold ballerina would allegedly exhibit such violent behavior. We know she committed the crime of manslaughter when she unlawfully took the life of her estranged husband, Doug, by shooting him to death. The Black Swan is no shrinking violet, but she better fall in line soon, because she's got a 20-year stretch that she's got to do for killing Doug. And now she might also face charges for the alleged battery on the corrections officer. I think the lesson is the Black Swan should have stuck to ballet, because then she wouldn't have become a jailbird. That's my opening statement. Let me know if you like it. Right now, time for your daily docket.
This is an AR-15 style semi-automatic rifle.
And approximately how much would this kind of weapon cost?
It's going to be around probably $1,000. Yeah, 7.25 pounds, which is essentially the amount of force it takes for this firearm to discharge when pulling the trigger.
Okay. And can you give us kind of something of an analogous weight to sort of quantify what that would feel like?
Yeah, so like a gallon of milk is about 8 pounds.
So we've got testimony resuming in our next hour in the trial of defendant and father Colin Gray. Today could potentially be when the state of Georgia rests. We'll go there live together when it starts. In Michigan, we've got the state's case continuing in the trial of defendant Dale Warner. Court gets underway at 9 a.m. Eastern. And also happening in Michigan, we've got the sentencing of defendant Desmond Burks. This is expected to start at 9 a.m. Eastern time. He pleaded guilty to murdering Detroit neurosurgeon Dr. Devin Hoover. Right now, though, we turn to your top story. Thousands of tips pouring in, and hundreds of law enforcement officials are working the case, and yet still no sign of Nancy Guthrie. It's been nearly 3 weeks now since the 84-year-old vanished from her Tucson home. The Pima County Sheriff's Department released an update on Thursday. Quote, lab analysis continues on biological evidence, DNA, found at Nancy Guthrie's residence. The only item that's been positively identified is the Ozark backpack. The FBI has received more than 20,000 tips to date. Now, we know DNA from an unknown man was found at Nancy Guthrie's house, and investigators are using genetic genealogy testing. Could that be key to cracking this case wide open? Let's talk about it. Let's bring in our law enforcement experts guests. I want to welcome in the sheriff in Erie County, Pennsylvania, Chris Campanelli, is with us, and so is retired police lieutenant Mike Gould. Good morning to you both. We've heard about genetic genealogical testing solving two of the biggest cases of our time. The Golden State Killer, Joseph DeAngelo, out in California, that former police officer who wouldn't have been caught but for that trash pull and the testing. And then also Brian Kohberger with the Idaho 4 student murders and how he wouldn't have gotten caught except for the trash pull and then the testing that showed spawn of Papa Kohberger was on that knife sheath. So when we think about how it cracked 2 big cases, is there hope here in the Guthrie case? Lieutenant Gould, would you kick off our conversation, please?
Yes, certainly. Good morning, Julie. Yeah, hope is eternal, right? Hope and prayer is eternal. Strategy is something different. Investigative strategy is something different. Yeah, of course. And genetic genealogy very well may be, but it's not going to happen tomorrow in this case. Once you start to resort to these more complicated DNA analysis, it just frankly takes time to do it. So, of course, there's hope. There's hope with every bit of evidence, but as time wanes, we're 19, 20 days into this. If you would have asked me when this happened, if we'd be still discussing this, I would have lost a bet on that because I just thought, based on all the digital stuff, that this would have come to a conclusion a little sooner. But of course, this could go on for months and months and years. And again, that's why I'm optimistic with the canine and dog research and dog searching for it. But yeah, of course, genealogy, it's a little bit out of my lane, but, and I'm sure your other guest will be able to shed more light on that.
You know, if someone did use one of those sites like 23andMe or something, and if they're related to this perp, Sheriff Campanelli, tell us, how much hope do you think there is for something like that to happen here to break the case?
Good morning, Julie. Yeah, and I agree with Mike. I think the genealogy and the biological testing, it's going to be a very slow process, as we all know. I think it absolutely is. It's going to pan out to something positive or negative. I think their sheriff's office is doing the right thing right now. They're not jumping the gun on anything. They're moving slowly, one step at a time, until they find out they have some evidence one way or the other.
Right. You know, speaking of their sheriff's office, I wanted to play a clip for you, Sheriff. So this was reported by Fox News. Jonathan Hunt, one of their reporters who's been there in Tucson covering this case, shared that the Pima County Sheriff's Department is going to be using polygraph tests. Let's take a listen to what was reported again on Fox News.
We can report that polygraph testing has been taking place here at the Sheriff's Department today. It is unclear at this point how many individuals have been tested or their identities, and the Sheriff's Office will not confirm at this point that the testing is related to the Guthrie case, but significantly, they did not deny that either.
Sheriff Campanelli, what are your thoughts on this, if it is related to the Guthrie case?
If it is related to the case, I mean, it's a good way to get a direction. But as we know, the polygraph it's not admissible in court. So how much weight does it really hold? It can point you in a direction, but I don't think it answers any questions.
Sure. And then admissibility issues later on in the courtroom, right? So maybe a good tool to use in the investigative process, but not dispositive. Sheriff, thank you for that. Lieutenant, I want you to take a look at something. Let's talk about the backpack here. So apparently investigators are working with Walmart on this Ozark backpack. They're trying to develop some leads by talking with Walmart management. They're saying that this Ozark Trail Hiker pack is sold exclusively at Walmart stores. And it's the only clothing item on that perp that's been definitively identified. Lieutenant, your thoughts on this, please?
Yeah, Julie, I think that is a very critical, what I would call a breadcrumb, because that's what we have here. We have breadcrumbs, circumstantial things that hopefully will complete this puzzle. It's like a jigsaw puzzle that has to come together by all of these various different investigative tools, including polygraph. Just on a side, and I agree with the sheriff, you know, polygraphs, if you asked me today to take a polygraph, I'd probably deny it. deny to do that. So that sometimes I just feel law enforcement now looks at me as a stronger suspect now because I don't want to take a polygraph for the facts we talked about. They're not admissible in court. So personally, that would be my decision. So does that make me a more likely suspect? So that's the only problem. It's a great investigative tool, but I don't like when people, if you're given your Miranda rights and you don't answer questions, does that make me a greater suspect? And I'm just using my constitutional rights not to speak. So these types of things just worry me sometimes in investigations when we jump to conclusions too prematurely.
Sure. No, great points, Lieutenant. Sheriff, I want to go back to you. Just general thoughts on the case and the way this scene was processed. You know, we saw the quick release of the crime scene at the start. And then we saw the return and the return and the return to do more processing. And of course, that raises the question of whether there's been contamination and whether there's any coming back from that, whether evidence might have been lost. I would love for you to weigh in on that aspect of this, please.
Well, absolutely. Absolutely that if they're returning to the scene, and it happens in every case, I believe, you know, you're going to return to the scene to do more forensic evidence. But every time you enter that scene, you're contaminating it more and more. And I think with each attempt they make, they're going to make it a little more difficult for themselves. And it is possible they could miss something. You know, hopefully they have the resources and the equipment to do everything the right way. So that's really the secret to it.
Right. And now it seems like they've got all the resources. Just makes you wonder, is it too little, too late? Don't know. We shall see. We're going to continue the conversation. I've got to hit a break. Sheriff, Lieutenant, stand by, please. Friends at home, get some more coffee. More on the search for Nancy Guthrie.
Suspects. I know there's been a lot out there about suspects, and I want to be very clear. At this time, we have not identified a suspect or a person of interest in this case.
So is it one suspect or more? We're weighing the possibility of accomplices. Plus, a Hawaii doctor is accused of trying to kill his wife by pushing her off a cliff. Defendant Gerhard Koenig tried to get the case thrown out, but the judge wasn't buying it.
In 2021, Dee Warner vanished without a trace.
Dale Warner. He's accused of murdering his wife, Dee.
Rumors of a troubled marriage spread throughout this small community.
She had contemplated divorce several times.
Now, after years of searching for Dee Warner,
her remains are found on the couple's property, sealed inside a welded shut storage tank.
we're still going to fight to the end to see that she gets her justice.
The hidden murder of Dee Warner. Live coverage today on CourtTV.
First of all, the sheriff's theories don't really matter. Okay. It's those who are investigating this case, their theories, their thoughts, and they share that and work that together as a team. And all of those possibilities are something we all look at and consider. But it'd be very irresponsible of me to give out certain key pieces of this case so that the public can know.
Well, the FBI seems to be taking the lead on the investigation. It's information from Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos that continues trending. According to CBS News, Sheriff Nanos believes that investigators have not ruled out an accomplice who aided the suspected kidnapper, who we see in that doorbell camera video outside of Nancy Guthrie's home the night that she vanished. CBS News also reporting that investigators have been using a tracking device known as a signal sniffer in an effort to detect possible signals from the 84-year-old's pacemaker. Now, authorities have not identified a suspect or even a person of interest in the case. So what are the next steps to breaking the case? Let's bring back in our law enforcement expert guests. The sheriff in Erie County, Pennsylvania, Sheriff Chris Campanelli, and retired police lieutenant and canine expert Mike Gould. Lieutenant, I'll start with you. You touched on this earlier, and when we talk about the next steps and we're hearing about this signal sniffer, I keep thinking of the dogs who sniff that you and I, and I'm sure Sheriff Chris, love so much. Talk to us here, please, about how dogs can help out at this point in time.
Right, Julie. So when I ran the canine unit in Nassau County, I used to challenge, we'd have a friendly bet between the Air Bureau, who had thermal imaging devices and all kinds of technology, and I would use our dogs on the ground, and we'd hide somebody in the middle of the woods, kind of playing hide and seek, and which technology was best. I've never lost. The dog was always like a odor-seeking heat missile that would find odor immediately. The sniffer device is really not, it's not a sniffer. It detects transmissions from Bluetooth devices, but it's not new. It's been used in the military and it's been used in the past. So, again, I have a bias towards dogs. They are admissible in court, by the way, as scientific instruments, just as, although polygraphs aren't. I think that's an interesting fact. So I do have a bias. I've seen it with in fact, as I said, I'm going to be looking for a missing person that disappeared 25 years ago. As soon as the ground thaws, and I'm very optimistic, we're going to locate her, her remains, obviously, that's been there for 25 years. So I got a bias. I'm sorry, Julie. The truth is we humans don't understand how a dog can smell things that are invisible to us. So that's the challenge. And even including law enforcement, we just don't have that ability to relate to that fact that dogs can sniff invisible odor.
Yes, I'm with you. I've been a big advocate for canines everywhere, Lieutenant. How I wish every department could have many, many canines serving. They can do what even the very best, most capable officer just cannot do because of their capabilities, as you described. It's amazing. Sheriff Campanelli, I see you nodding here. Your thoughts on what should come next in order to break this case? What do you think that these investigators ought to be doing, please?
Honestly, they need to do as much as they can. Any option that they have, they should be trying at this point. The Bluetooth technology that Mike was talking about is amazing stuff. The canines, if there's a way to use a canine in this situation, I think they would be foolish not to at least try it. Their track records are amazing, and it's undeniable they're valuable.
Yeah, the canines, I mean, when I think about that, I think, my gosh, what they can do. And Lieutenant, we're 3 weeks out. Might there still be sense there at that house?
Completely, and the sheriff touched on this before. For dogs, there's a sweet spot. Right now, the area is contaminated. Sadly, if this becomes simply a recovery rather than a rescue, once that's determined, and truthfully, the interest of the investigators kind of wane. So there's a sweet spot in temperature, environment. So when the dust settles, I did my best work when investigators were gone, people trampling around. We had this problem at 9/11. Once they're gone, the dogs are going to hunt like my dog hunts bones in the backyard in the spring when the weather breaks. My dog's like a beeline to the bones he buried last year, not by writing it down in his iPhone. And he'll find those bones that have been buried under the snow in about 2 minutes, soon as the ground thaws. So my point is, for dogs, there is this sweet spot of temperature and environment. When people are done trampling around, many times our pet at home, honestly, could detect odor anomalies, right? Your dog does that in your backyard every day. He goes back and smells the scent that was left yesterday. So I'm optimistic of the recovery. Sadly, the rescue, as time goes on, we have to be more pragmatic than, prayers, I hope. I'd love for Nancy to knock on my front door right now. But pragmatically, when it shifts to a recovery, we're going to be better off.
Mm-hmm. Right, Lieutenant. Thank you for the explainer. Sheriff, in terms of the search area, we touched on this yesterday on the show, and it's worth a repeat. What do you think the likelihood is that Nancy Guthrie is still in Arizona? Or is she out of the country at this point? Sheriff Campanelli, I'd love your thoughts on that, please.
Well, I think we all hope that she's alive and well and still in our country. I read an article about crossing the border into Mexico, and that we have contact with them, and they've just figured that she has not been taken to Mexico. That's the last thing that I read about it, and honestly, I don't think she would have left the country. I can only hope after this amount of time that she's alive and well. And let's start there and continue the search.
Right. Does it seem to you both, I want to ask you about this question, that this may have been carried out by someone local in Tucson? And why I ask that question is because the first place we saw these purported ransom notes popping up was with local media, and then to TMZ, and of course TMZ really got all the traction because of the national reach. But I'm just wondering what you think in terms of where this might have originated, if it was from someone in the area and multiple persons perhaps that carried this out. Lieutenant.
Yeah, Julie. So speculation, I'm losing in the speculation battle, so I'd like to just stick with the facts. So the facts is that this kidnapping of this nature is not typical at all. Kidnappings are motivated by money or political ideology. They want money. They don't communicate in the media. They communicate directly with the family. Yeah, and I do believe there may, of course, be an accomplice one way or the other. Maybe not on the scene of the actual scene. We don't know. But I certainly think there may be an accomplice, and somebody for sure knows who this person is. Whether they're going to come forward or not is another question. But, I never really bought into the notes on TMZ. I think these are opportunists looking to extort money from people, or just whatever. They could be 16-year-old kids in their mother's basement, frankly, using AI to develop these very sophisticated ransom notes. But again, I like to stick with the facts and not speculate on, if she's at Area 51 by Martians or something. There's just too much speculation, and I need to just stick with the facts of the case.
Sure. And going back through that, Sheriff Campanelli, when we think about Nancy Guthrie's mobility issues, she can't walk very far without assistance. And we talked about this on the program early on. I believe it was Manuel Gomez who said, firmly, he said, I can tell you for sure there's at least one other person, because somebody had to have been in a car nearby, was what he was saying, in order for this, the perp we see on the porch might have gone in and grabbed her up, and there had to have been somebody in a getaway car. Your thoughts on that theory, Sheriff? Can we assume that at least two people did this?
Well, Julie, honestly, I would never like to assume anything. Honestly, I think, most likely there would probably be a second person involved. It'd be hard to remove that person from their home, get them to a vehicle without somebody seeing something. So, I mean, I think, I know they're all looking through like these Ring doorbell things and all this throughout the area. There are any cameras that they have available to them. But I think it would be difficult for one person, especially a person that can't be very mobile. It would be difficult for one person to do it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Boy, I love talking to you both. You know that. Thank you for your expertise on the show and your service. Sheriff Chris Campanelli, Lieutenant Mike Gould, thank you kindly.